I was camped out in a rabbit valley on the border of Colorado and Utah. I was traveling the country and sleeping in the back of my truck or in a teepee-style tent I had bought off of Amazon. That particular night, I had set up my tent in a desolate camping area about 15 to 20 minutes from the highway. There was only one other rig in the campsites, and they were pretty far away, so it was nice, quiet, and peaceful. I dozed off for the night and awoke to some odd sounds on my tent. It sounded like someone was dragging their fingers up and down the nylon, walking around the tent. I sat completely still and just listened to the whirring of something scraping against the nylon without making a move. About 10 minutes or so went by. It felt like an eternity, and the sounds stopped. I laid in my cot and listened for another 15 minutes or so, when all of a sudden, my tent capsized and collapsed over me and my cot. A small center support had tilted, angling the tent about 45 degrees, so I could still access the opening. I ripped the zipper open and ran for my truck, crawled into the back, locked the topper from the inside, and grabbed my firearm. I laid awake for the rest of the night until sunrise so I could go retrieve my tent, cook stove, and cot from the campsite. I returned to the campsite to inspect the area to see if I was just on the road too long and getting paranoid, or if an intruder or a guest had come to visit in the wee hours of the night. Around my tent in the desert dirt and snow were shoe prints making a steady circle around it. The footprints were a different size than mine and looked like they came from a pointed cowboy boot. They had circled the tent several times and then wandered off into the valley. I've never been back since, and I still get the heebie-jeebies every time I go tent camping now. Anyone else have a crazy experience while out in the backwoods or desert? Please comment down below. A friend and I were on a 3-day hike through a state park, not too far from a major city. The campsite we stayed at the first night was meant to be hike-in only, but there was a fire access road running right by it. Other than us, it was completely deserted. We had both been asleep in our separate tents for maybe an hour when we woke to the sound of a dog barking and a loud engine getting uncomfortably close. We heard what was clearly a ute with a dog on the back step across from us, its headlights blazing. We were on the far side of the campground, across a small creek from where they had entered via the fire access road. We could hear 2 male voices, along with a lot of swearing and strange banging and clanging noises. We had whispered conversation and agreed that we both felt very uneasy, but decided the best course of action was to stay quiet in our tents. That way, they wouldn't know we were 2 women alone or have any reason to engage with us. We assumed they were just going to set up camp and have some drinks or something. Then we heard them getting closer. The metallic clanging and banging sounds moved with them. I could hear the dog walking around my tent, sniffing at it. That made me extremely tense because I thought they might come over to get the dog. We started hearing scraping, digging, splashing, more banging and swearing. I could make out snatches of conversation. Eventually, after lying there petrified in the dark, I heard enough of what they were saying to realize they were panning for gold in the creek at 10 or 11 p.m. After maybe 45 minutes or so, one of them injured himself and they decided to leave. I was so relieved when they did. There was something deeply unsettling about the whole situation. When my friend and I debriefed after the barking and headlights had receded into the distance, she told me she hadn't been able to hear what they were saying and was 100% convinced the entire time that they were burying a body. It has since become part of our hiking lore and we'll laugh about it now, but it was such a weird, vulnerable experience. The only reason I can come up with for night prospecting is that you're supposed to have a permit, and maybe they thought it was worth getting wet, cold, and scaring a couple of hikers to avoid getting fined. Here's one of the few super sketchy situations I found myself in. My partner and I were camped out in a public use area in Alaska on a work-away trip, about 40 minutes outside of Anchorage in the Chugach Mountains. We were 20 minutes off the highway, along the river, with no service. There were a few other people dispersed throughout the area, including some sketchy, Breaking Bad-esque RVs that looked like they hadn't moved in a long time. It was definitely one of the less populated areas we had camped in, but we felt more or less comfortable. We had found a nice little spot away from everyone. Here's where it starts getting creepy. Around 10:30, a car slowly started making its way through the campground. You had to drive along a pretty gnarly 4x4 trail to get out onto the beach, so it took them about 10 minutes to reach the area. Once there, they were just creeping around, driving super slow and stopping randomly. Eventually, they parked about 30 yards away, got out, and stood around for a while. It was getting late, and we had been watching them, but we decided we were just being paranoid and got into our tent. About 10 minutes after settling in, we heard tires on gravel. They had pulled their car up right next to our tent, maybe 5 feet away. As I said, we were very tucked away, and there was no justifiable reason to drive that close. I got off the tent when I heard them pull up and put the car in park, holding a can of bear spray in my hand. But before I even stood up, they started reversing and drove away. Then they parked again about 60 yards away, facing us with their headlights on. By this point, it was almost midnight. Eventually, they left, but we were so freaked out that we ended up packing up and leaving right then. Who knows what would have happened if we had stayed or kept quiet when they pulled up. People are often afraid of wildlife on adventures, but more often than not, it's other humans that are the most potentially dangerous thing you could encounter. I had an acquaintance many years ago who shared a scary hiking story. He was hiking the Utah desert. He had parked far down a dirt road and hiked toward a trail with a 1,500-foot elevation gain in an extremely remote area, accompanied by his 3 and 5-year-old kids. Eventually, they decided the trail was too steep and wag and turn around. Heading back down, he could now see his truck far off in the distance and notice a figure near it. As he got closer, he saw that the person was messing with the truck, looking in the windows, lying down to inspect the undercarriage, and then climbing into the bed of the truck and disappearing from view. This acquaintance was very frightened and assumed the person was attempting an ambush. When he got to within about half a mile of his truck, he shouted, "Get away from my truck! Get out of here!" The man peeked out from the bed but stayed put. So he pulled out his gun and fired a warning shot. The man then hopped out of the truck bed, made a sweeping motion with his arms toward each of the tires, and began walking away. It became a bit of a cat and mouse game as they tried to reach the truck without letting the man catch up to them. When they finally got there, they found all 4 tires slush and the fuel tank in the bed stab open, leaking everywhere. They were stranded in the middle of nowhere with no way out and could still see the creepy tire slasher walking away in the distance until he suddenly turned around and began heading back toward them. My friend checked his cell phone and, surprisingly, had service. He called 911. Before the man could make it all the way back to them, about 10 police officers arrived. The man saw them, took off running, and the officers gave chase on foot. They even called in a plane to assist with the search, but the man escaped into the remote Book Cliffs of Utah. My acquaintance was terrified he might run into the man again or that someone else might become a victim. For 2 years, he heard nothing. Eventually, the unknown tire slasher was arrested and linked to the incident after committing similar crimes. It turned out he was a transient living in a nearby ghost town called Woodside, Utah. His name is Jason Polk. If you search his name along with Crime Utah, you'll see that he is still having run-ins with the law to this day.